Today, the day I've looked forward for a long time. I'm going to get to pull the lower fairings off this morning. I hope they're going to come out as good as the rest of the parts on this project. And I am really looking forward to this because this is going to be the first part of the plastic that gets repainted with the Bentley black. And I'll get to see what it's going to look like when I put some of the gold trim on it. Should be an exciting day. And you can see what happened last time I rode the bike. I rode the bike with these paper things contact cemented on. The trim was flying off. Well, but it gave me an idea of what the bike was going to look like with the trim on. Not exactly, but we do have a pattern for each piece of the trim now. And just like the FZR project, as it starts to unfold, it takes on a life of its own. And we're into this a couple of weeks already. And every morning I come out to the garage and flip the battery chargers and I think, wow, another exciting day. And of course, if you're passionate about football or golf or whatever, I'm not sure, that this is my passion and I do enjoy sharing it. So step one is I got to pull a bike out into the work area, and this garage is crowded. I often think about getting a couple more motorcycles, and then common sense takes over and I think, yeah, great, if I never have to work on them, if they were just static bikes and you never had to do any maintenance, it'd be fine. But a day like today, I want to enjoy the day, and I want to have, this is the prime real estate of this garage. Just big enough to work on one motorcycle. We have a lift in case we need it. And no matter how I arrange these bikes, and I've arranged them like playing a Rubik's Cube, there's only so many square feet. You just can't win. So it's a relatively simple job to take these panels off. They come off. The thing with all of the panels, all of the Japanese motorcycles, they're done in some kind of an, I'm sure it's a specific plastic that is easy to injection mold and takes the color well and everything. But there's always a problem getting paint to reliably stick to it. And that's always the challenge when you're doing these kind of parts. They need to be etched, sanded, they need to be primed with Sealer primer before you do anything. And so today, just getting them off is a matter of 6 or 8 screws. And then we can go inside where it's nice and warm. It's pretty cold out here right now. And as we left this in the garage overnight, Turbo Steve's tank is just as really nice. Now I'm going to have to try to bury these decals. And they are kind of ripply, but I'm going to give it an extra day of drying, or maybe 2. Block sand these down some, and then try to get 2 or 3 extra coats of clear in there. Now, if I'm really lucky, I'll be able to do this clear, and I'll have these parts ready for clear, so I can do it all in one afternoon, one day, whatever. That always works. I put extra clear on the stripe, so it should be able to block sand that striping so you almost can't feel it. And every part of this, this is a brand new tank. It's never even had gas in it, so it should be perfect. Now what made this job a little bit easier is I've used all these self-locking Bolt Depot nuts. Just made it a little bit easier, but we're going to save all the hardware. Of course, we have a little container, and then there's this one special bolt for the front of the fairing. I'll put that all in that little container. And we did ride this bike for quite a while with the lower fairings off of it. I always thought that looked cool. You could see the exhaust pipes and stuff, but right now, those fairings are going to get a high gloss black finish, Bentley black. Now, after 11 years, those things are battle scarred, grease scarred. Now, part of what I do I won't do it today. At some point, I'll have the upper fairings off and I'll have that whole engine exposed. I'll steam clean the whole thing out in the driveway, and then get it immaculately clean for no other reason than just my own satisfaction. But right now we got to get these parts ready, get them cleaned, maybe get them prepped, maybe get them primed. I don't know how much time we're going to have today, but that's a giant step for mankind. These will be the first parts, and when they're painted and cleared, we'll get to see what the final finish is going to look like on this whole project. Now, before I put him back in his rotation here, in his parking garage, I know, because I did it with the FCR, once you pull all the fairings off, once you get down underneath here and you steam clean everything and you see the crap that comes off, it's just a mess. And of course, part of this job is we're going to try to have these little toe plates that protect the frame. They're done out of aluminum. I thought maybe I could make up some carbon fiber copies of them. That might be a nice touch. We might have a time while it's like this to polish the whole exhaust system again. Give that a good polishing. And the big thing that's going to change the bike too is the black forks and painting the other half of the fender. Why they leave half of the fender flat black, I have no idea. Anyway, more, and it changes. And I want to mention something too. Scott, who's restoring a 250 Ninja, sent me some videos. He's going to have a video channel very soon, and he's going to try to do some of the restoration in conjunction with us. So I hope that works out for him. I enjoy looking at other people's videos, and hopefully they enjoy looking at mine, especially while they're having coffee or vodka. Well, now it'll be good just to get out of this cold garage and go have another cup of coffee. Woo. It is no fun. And this is, hey, by the way, just mentioning something. This is why I have carpeting in the garage. When I got to lay on this crap for hour after hour, that carpet saves your bacon. I always have a little tray to keep all the bolts in. I'm going to definitely save all these rubber washers, although I do have all new ones. There's no sense using these, wasting them. These are in perfect shape. In fact, the fairings themselves are in nice shape, except for, and this is what you always have to look for when you're doing a restoration, you look for anything that looks like it's cracking or broken. Well, look at this back here. I got tar or something dripped in there. Who the hell knows where that came from? Nuclear waste. Well, that's the contact cement from me putting stickers on this. This will all get cleaned up in the next time we get to work on this, which I hope is soon. But see, this one here is split. I'll fix that with carbon fiber so it never gets any worse. And this will need a really, really thorough cleaning. Now, keep in mind, this lower fairing thing really takes a whipping. It takes a beating, boy. There's no doubt about it. And I think that's why the manufacturers, of course, they like to leave it flat black because it's no work for them. In fact, look at this. There's some more. Must have parked under a tar tree or something here. Who the hell knows? But it did. And on my R1, I have a clear plastic thing, that plastic stuff that I got from Midgley. Keep it from scratching up. But this needs, really, of all the parts that we're going to do, this is going to need the most preparation. I'm not going to try to skimp on it, of course, because when these are done and those arrowheads are there, it's going to be really, really nice. Before I would ever put any sandpaper on anything or grind it or anything, I'd like to degrease it or get as much of the residue off as I can. Now, the best way I know to do this is with full strength simple green. Just put it on, let it sit a while, and in our case we're going to steam clean it off, because I don't want to have any chance that these parts are flexible and the paint will tend to crack if it doesn't have a good bond. And I want to make sure, I'll show the method I use to do these type of parts. Been relatively successful, but step one, and it wouldn't matter which side you do first, I'll pull all the rubber grommets out later. What I want to do is just get a nice amount of this on the whole part, and I'll do the inside also. Just slobber it around. I want it to sit there for a few minutes. I want it to do its magic trick. While it's doing its magic trick, I'll take out those rubber bushings. Good old-fashioned simple green. Now, there's some stuff that's even stronger than simple green that they sell in Harbor Freight and it's about the same price. It's a degreaser. It's an expensive degreaser. They make two levels. One is relatively, I think, $4 or $5 a gallon or something, and it's like Simple Green. And then there's the really expensive, it looks like nuclear waste. The only thing I like to really use that for is if we really had something contaminated. These parts are not in terrible shape. They're not really awful anyway. Now, it just goes with the territory. Now, what I always try to do is a thing called leapfrogging. Leapfrogging means that instead of taking a whole bike apart and then priming the whole bike and then painting the whole bike, I do it in bits and pieces. And the advantage of doing it in bits and pieces is because I'm not doing this 8 hours a day. Usually I'm babysitting or I'm doing other stuff. I always have a part that's enjoyable to work on. Like today, I'll get one or maybe both of these prepped up for priming. I don't know. And number two, I never ever rush. That is the death knell of good quality work. You would never want to go to a dentist that rushed. That's my analogy. In fact, the dentist that Karen and I go to now, he has a saying, good dental work takes time. And we're there a lot. I don't have false teeth yet either. I don't know if you notice, and not everybody gets to 74 and has more than 2 or 3 teeth. But anyway, well, we're just joking around anyway. I wanted to show this. I'm just letting it, make sure I get in every nook and cranny. Now, that's going to sit there. In fact, what I'll do, just because I'm a generous fool, I'll put a little more on this. And while this is sitting here, I'll soak down and wipe down the other side. While that's going on, I'll fire up the steam cleaner. I really love my Harbor Freight steam cleaner, and I use it all the time to do our shower and bathroom and wheels on the car, and it's really good. Once a year, what I do to whatever bike I'm restoring, I clean inside by the engine and underneath. And anyway, I save all the little rubber bushings, even though I have new ones. I have a whole box of these that I bought. I want to use the originals if possible. And as I said before, this is the one step that a lot of people leave out, or they go right in, grab a piece of sandpaper and start sanding, and whatever wax, and for sure there's road tar, grit, wax, grease, oil. You're just driving it right down into the part. That nuclear waste stuff that Harbor Freight sells, the reason I don't really like to use it is a lot of times it'll take on aluminum or something, it'll etch the aluminum, it's so powerful. But it's the only thing when we had one of our good friends drop a quart of oil out of his truck in our driveway. It was the only thing that cleaned it up. And so I got acquainted with having a few gallons of it in the house from time to time. So anyway, but this is one part I just do a few times, and it's a good thing to just go back and forth over and over again with some newer, cleaner paper towels, because the next step on this is to take it in and steam clean it. And the steam really puts the final touch on it. Now, I've gone without steam cleaning it, but for the amount of hours I'm going to put into these parts, and the fact that these are going to be focal parts of the bike that are not going to be stock. They're going to be very different than stock. By painting them gloss instead of this flat, whatever you want to call it, it again will change the whole look of a motorcycle. Now, every time I'm steam cleaning something, Karen brings her engagement ring down, and I can pretend I'm a jeweler. And anytime I've ever gone to our local jeweler, he has the same steam cleaner I have. When I bought that steam cleaner at Harbor Freight, I was not wondering, what the hell I'm going to do with it most of the time, but it's another thing. It's really useful. We haven't done it this year. We get back from a ride where the roads are really salty. Boy, did that get up under the fairings and everything. Beautiful. Anyway, back to work. Okay, so the last step before we actually touch anything abrasive to this is some prep wall. And I'm just going to let it soak on. I see plenty of spots here where this is going to need to be sanded. It looks like we went off-roading here for a while. And but this is the one thing you can really do to make yourself a problem, is if you get a part like this, and even though this is clean, I'm still getting stuff off of it, and you take some sandpaper and start grinding it down there, and it's got silicone and fingerprints, it's hard enough to keep the parts clean when they're clean. But then when you start with something that's terrible, you really stack the deck, and you stack it not in your favor. Now, there's a couple little repair spots I see before we even get into anything like refinishing, and that contact cement I used to hold that fake trim on, well, it served its purpose, so I really can't say anything bad about it. But now, when we actually do get to do the sanding, there's a couple of things that'll stack the deck in our favor. Because this part is going to flex, it's a flexible plastic. It's like the bumpers on modern cars. Well, the modern car paint does flex to a certain degree, but we don't want to put it to more of a test than necessary. And this, more than anything on the whole bike, this part is going to take a beating. So I'd like to really get the paint to stick as good as possible, and pay any price necessary. I don't want a couple years into the restoration and see a boop and a bubble or something coming up here. And like the FZR, it withstood a whole year of riding. It withstood a crash. So far the paint is pretty well flawless, but I don't want to put it to the test, to be honest. So if you look real close, let's see if I can get something on the camera. You can see this one is broken, this one isn't. And that's the only one that needs our attention. Now, unlike some motorcycles, and I think they're the ones that they try to make the fairings so thin for racing purposes or whatever. And they accomplish that, but the downside is every time you tighten a bolt, I mean, on several of Vlad's bikes, the Bomoda especially, replaced over and over and over and over and fixed them. And so this is the only one, and it looks like that one we could put a washer there, but as long as I have this apart, I want to fix it. Now what I did, I took a little piece of carbon fiber. I'll get some CA, get that right on there, and that'll definitely keep it from cracking any worse. Okay, we're down. This is just ordinary Brodak thick CA, nothing high tech. A little piece of carbon on top of it. Let the CA kick off. It'll take about 30 seconds. This will just help it soak up. Now, this is a really nice little bit of preventive maintenance that we're not going to have that crack halfway through one of our riding seasons. Now, wherever the hole would be, when I re-drill the hole, I'll do it with a Dremel tool and a burr that's made to go through without catching. If I were to try to drill this, it's going to catch the carbon fiber, and I burn a hole through with a Dremel tool. That is definitely not going to break. That is definitely a nice way to reinforce these. Now, if we saw any other cracks anywhere in this, I would reinforce it immediately. I wanted to do a little experiment. I got a pad of these. They come all different, I guess, roughnesses. This is 60. I'm not sure. This does not cut like 60 sandpaper, but on the bottom of this, what I wanted to do is a little test. Because what I want to do is etch this part and scratch it, but I don't want to put big, deep sanding gouges in it. And I want to see if this is going to do what I want it to do. I also have that one repair on the other fairing port, but I won't know until I give it a try. Now I have to look at this, and to be honest, I don't think it's going to work. It's too smooth and shiny. It doesn't leave enough of a scratch. So what I'm going to do is, and again, that's why I always do the test myself, I'll get a piece of the smoothest of the sandpaper. I think I have 120. See what I did, I bought a whole bunch of these, thinking at least it would be some useful information to put on the video. And they come all different grits. You buy a pack and they're all different. 100, 80, like nice to have 120 would be nice. 100, 120. Oh, oh, oh. And again, the sandpaper is cheap enough. There we go. And I know it's useful information, so let's just see side by side with the pad. Now I can see the difference. This is taking material off. I want to show this because useful information. You can't really tell. Well, when you see the material that's coming off, and that looks like it has the amount of tooth we need. So the answer is going to be to basically go over the whole part and then detail it out by hand. And this is going to be very time consuming because what I want to do is get every edge radius. I don't want to have paint peeling. I want to get all of this, and where paint tends to pull up is in a valley. All of these little valleys, all of these areas here. So this is going to be a very labor intensive thing to get this part prepped. It may take the rest of the day. I don't care. What I do want to have is I want to have that little tooth on it. Just enough of a tooth. Now the other side has a giant gouge in it. I'm going to try to sand that out as best I can and hopefully not need to have any Bondo in there. I would love to just be able to sand that out with the power tool before I do any hand sanding, but here's the part that's sanded, and if you leave out steps, you never really get to this level of finish. So we're not looking to leave out steps. I'm going to take my time, because I can picture these parts. See, I've already got the picture in my mind. Looking like this with those gold spears, and it's inspiring me to just do excellent work. You know, both of the parts are machine sanded out now. The next step is to wet sand them out, and then they should be ready for primer. I might have mentioned this before. I wanted to just remind Scott. Scott's starting his Ninja project very soon. Maybe he's already started it. But one of the things, and we're working on lowers today, the lower fairings, you can ride the bike with the lower fairings off, and sometime just you want to pretend you have a new bike and you don't want to go out and spend money and re-register it and whatever. Just for a change of pace, you can ride the bike without the lowers, and it kind of changes the look of the bike. Now here's what I wanted to show. At this point in the restoration, and this was early on in the restoration, I still didn't have the Norton muffler. I didn't have this piece painted black, which wound up changing the look of the bike. I didn't have the gold wheels. I didn't have the lowers painted. In fact, I was assuming I'd never put the lowers back on, but then I wound up changing my mind. I wound up making an evil twin out of it. And I wound up, now this history, this helmet, if you see this helmet in here, this is not a usable, rideable helmet. That helmet used to belong to Frank Straub, a late Frank Straub, good friend of mine. And I thought as a little tribute to, to him, it's kind of like a helmet from the old days, an old Bellstar kind of helmet with no vents. But anyway, as a point that I'm trying to make is, a restoration is really never over. You don't do it one winter and then it's done. In my case, maybe every year, every 2 years, I do the evil twin thing, where I swap the bike around, change the bike around, and I have the feeling like it's a new bike. Just thought I'd mention that before I get into the wet sanding. So the next part, I'm going to get up some Indasa 600 sandpaper, and I really want to detail these parts before I put the final, well, hopefully the final sanding. And of course there isn't a lot of body work, so they should be relatively easy to get primed, and maybe even before the day is over, get them in black. But you never know. Now I have heard people say, oh boy, you spend a lot of time prepping up these parts and degreasing them and sanding them and detailing them? Well, I do. And why do you think I do that? Because there's been times in my life that I've taken apart and I've been kind of in a rush and maybe daydreaming and not thinking it through, and put 100 hours into finishing and detailing and decals and whatever and final buffing, and then seeing that awful thing of like a bubble or a crack, something that could have been avoided by getting the paint to bond to the part. That's the whole thing in a nutshell, is to get it to bond with a little bit of a tooth. Now, I've done these with 400, I've done them with 600. The 600, because basically what happens with black paint, and especially this black, it has got to be perfect. There is any little flaw, any little ripple, anything in black, you'll see it. So it's almost like when somebody paints something black, they're challenging you to think, let's see you go find a mistake. Check it out. You paint something white, you could paint over chewing gum and it goes away. And when you do dull, especially black, flat, that dread thing, black, flat black. You do flat black, you can go out into the middle of the street and it'll look fine. So if you're really looking to show off your skills as a painter, paint it gloss black. Everybody will be impressed. Now, this is one of the steps I tend to be fanatical about. I fold the sandpaper back a few times. I want to get all of the edges, these edges where this ends, to be perfectly radiused. Because when that comes to a razor blade point, if you feel any sharp points, that's where the paint is going to tend to crack. A good example is right up around here, where the clutch cover is. To have a razor sharp edge there, that's where in time the paint will tend to crack. So getting all those radiuses and edges, all of the valleys, anywhere down there, down in that valley, can fold up the sandpaper and get it right down into the valley. Sounds like I'm mad, doesn't it? Anyway, Scott, I'm rooting for you. I hope your project's going to work out great. Looking forward to seeing some pictures. Looking forward to, I know you're making up a video channel, but as soon as I get the information for that, I'll share it, of course. And hey, sharing the information is, I just think it's one of the beauties of the modern world where we have an internet, we can do this. In the old days, in the days when I was building model planes, you had to physically send a picture to your friend in California. Now I can just a couple of keystrokes and, or YouTube. Oh man, is YouTube, without YouTube, holy mackerel, there'd be nothing on TV. I'd be watching sitcoms or all the nonsense other people watch. Anyway, not to make any points here, but I want to get one. Now I'm doing leapfrogging. The whole idea of this is I want to get one part sanded, get it tack ragged down, and get it outside and get it primed. Just shoot a coat of primer on it. Because while that part is drying, and we're talking about 20 minutes to a half an hour, I can get the other part sanded. So that's why the way the leapfrogging works is there's always a part drying, and then you tend to let things like Turbo Steve's tank or my other side panel, you're not in a rush to get it done. It avoids the temptation. It's like not buying ice cream and it's not in the refrigerator. You don't have to worry about having willpower. If it's not in the refrigerator, you're not going to eat it. So at least that's my version of willpower. Anyway, we're going to work on this for the next few minutes, dry it off, tack rag it, get it out, and get a coat of primer on it and see how it plays out. Now remember, all plastic parts, I would always, and I haven't found the difference between the Rust-Oleum or the Duplicolor. Not a big difference anyway. They seem to be pretty similar, but the word sealer is important. Now, I've gotten 2 coats of primer on this. I'm going to let this dry up by a heating vent, but now the beauty of piggybacking comes in. This part will be drying. It needs to dry at least 20 minutes. A half hour would be even better. Since there's no Bondo work or anything to do to it, it'll then be ready to paint black. And it looks like the weather's holding up for the whole day here. So Scott asked me in an email the other day about primer. Again, I'll just go over this because this is good information to share. Anything plastic, primer, sealer. Have not found, and as I look at my selection of about 20 cans of primer, there's filler primer. If you have a lot of Bondo work, yeah, somewhere in the thing you might want to use that. I'm not sure. There's self-etching primer, and that's for anything metal. And the idea with, you want to sand metal, and in 30 seconds have it in prime. The metal oxidizes instantly, especially when you wet sand. And we got self-etching, another can. Here's another good thing. Here's some Duplicolor self-etching primer. But I haven't found a big giant difference. But here's what I do. And this is a nice little trick. See, there's about 8 or 10 cans back there. When a can gets down to where there's almost nothing in this can, well, you know what that's good for? When you're going to sand it. If you're not going to sand it, when you put that last coat on, now this coat here, I don't think we're going to have to sand, basically because there's no Bondo work. Well, then I like to use a new can for the last coat because it'll spray a lot more consistently. An older can that's half empty is, it's just not as consistent. So I would use the top 2/3 of the can and then save it for when I'm going to sand stuff. And that's how I've accumulated all this primer. Now, I won't mention any things that I've had bad luck with, but there's been some primers that I have bought and thrown them away. I just said that and usually they're primers that they probably have some, you know, some reason for being there. But I bought some real high-end stuff at Gavin's one day, $12 a can. The can spit and made a mess, and I didn't like the way it sanded, but this and the Rust-Oleum. You can't go wrong with either one of them. They both are, but it's got, on plastic parts, that's the key. It's got to say the word sealer. That's good information. Now, as I say this about this is drying under a heating vent. You know, this is a 100-year-old house. When it's in the 30s outside, or the 40s, that heat almost never shuts off. So what happens is, now this part is going to be up there for some extra time drying before we wet sand it. That extra time before I do the last sand out is in my favor. Being under the heating vent, I don't want it right up on the heat because I don't want to, in essence, force dry it. I want it to dry a normal dry cycle. So I got this, and this is plastic. The paint won't stick to it, and it'll lay flat, so everything should just lay down real nice there. That should be in my favor. So now I'll do this other one off camera, get it in primer, and we'll see how much time is left in the day. But right now, having that part in primer, and maybe even black, I got to see what time the baby's coming over. Now, another useful tip, and that's the whole purpose of doing these videos, the useful tip that I've found in cold weather, and this works pretty well for me. House is basically ambient 65. We don't keep the house real warm because it's an old house. But I always take, just before I go outside to prime this, I've dried it. But you'll notice something. You think this is dry. If you run outside and prime it, it isn't really dry. Watch what happens when you hit it with a hairdryer. See it change in color? That's moisture. Now, if you didn't do this step in cold weather, right after wet sanding, well, of course, if you're in a warm weather climate, that's going to evaporate almost instantly. But no matter what you're doing, when it's really, really cold outside, and this morning it's cold, and today, it's the whole day it's cold. So what happens is, if you are very quick on the trigger, you run out there and you prime it, you've trapped that moisture unnecessarily in the paintwork. Now, another thing, once it's dry, to tack rag it down, and you'll always notice there's some extra stuff that you didn't think was going to come off. And one of the suggestions I made to Scott in the emails we've been sharing almost every day is, he's out in Kansas, find a body shop supplier or a paint shop and go with their recommendations for paint and thinner, because that's what you're going to be dealing with. And they have the equivalent of what we use, but if they can suggest something, and if it doesn't work, you can at least go back there and ask them, hey, what did I do wrong? Now I always prefer shooting 2 or 3 light coats. I never want to get big heavy coats that drip and run. Just makes extra work. So now I'll be ready to put down by the heating vent and we'll go have another cup of coffee. I'll be ready for black in 20 minutes to a half an hour. Now that dries usually a little on the flat side or a satiny side because it's ready for the clear. But now that's got to dry overnight and then we can mask off the arrowheads and get to see what our gold is going to look like in real life and maybe even get some clear on the next day. Now what's worked in our favor is the day has held all day. We haven't had any really terrible weather, terrible wind or anything. And that's why we've gotten so much done in one day. This was an amazing day. I just got to shoot the black on this and celebrate with 2 extra cups of coffee. So the way this day played out, pretty good. We got these parts in black, and I don't see any reason tomorrow or the next time we get to work on this, we should get the gold arrows on and some clear. Boy, that'll be wonderful. And I think Turbo Steve wants to come over tomorrow, sand his tank. Maybe we can get the clear on the tank, more clear on the tank, and clear on this all at the same time. That'd be a nice little thing to do. But this really, I'm amazed. This really did come out good. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.